Today you're going to come along with me for a full engagement shoot. You're going to see all the photos that I take and all of my camera settings. If you're looking to learn how to direct and post couples for engagement photos, you are in the right place. So I usually start off every shoot by asking the couple to kind of check in their pockets and make sure they don't have any cell phones or keys. They're making bulges in their pants. And then from there, I ask the bride-to-be if she has any particular side that she prefers. Sometimes they will have a good side or a side they want to shoot from, and I'll preference that side throughout the entire shoot.
Which arm is like cooler?
I'd say this one.
Alright, so
I start things off by having them face each other, by having the groom put his hands around her waist and really pull her in close at the hips until there is no more gap between their hips.
just around her waist, pull her in right there. There you go. And then just hang on.
Inspecting how their body language is, I tell her to put her arms around his neck and to pull him a little bit closer.
Put it around his neck and just kind of pull him in a little bit. There you go.
And the reason for this is that closeness really is key. So the closer you get, the better the photo is going to look.
And then have you guys get your foreheads a little bit closer together right there. And then Mariel, with your left hand, kind of like drop it down just a little bit, like right on it. There you go. And then you guys lean in together, your foreheads a little bit more.
In this case, I have her lower hand and tuck her elbow in a bit closer to her body. And then from there, they're going to lean their foreheads together to kind of close the gap. Here I have the couple hold the pose as they come closer for a closer crop, and I instruct her to put her nose on the other side of his nose.
Try to have you put your nose on the other side.
And this is so I can feature more of her face in the photo. So in this same pose, I have them look at me for a camera aware shot and have her drop her arm a little bit more.
Perfect. And you can drop your arm kind of like around him.
And I tried to have them actually not smile at first and be more serious.
Not smile. So a little serious right there.
But this actually turns into kind of a happy accent, and the groom-to-be actually smiles and laughs a little bit. And then here we're trying again for that serious shot. As I'm shooting, I'm always looking to make sure that I'm varying my framing by stepping in and out and shooting vertical or horizontally, especially for these camera wear shots, as they are usually the ones that get printed the most by couple as well as their family and relatives.
Kind of like get in this stuff. There you go.
And here I'm always reminding them to lean their foreheads in.
And then just lean your foreheads in right there.
For this particular shot, I was really trying to frame them in the composition where there are two trees on the outside and that they are centered in between them. Now I switch up to a wider focal length and I really try to get it in close to capture some natural motions.
And then you wrap your arms just around his neck right there.
And I'm having them turn their noses toward me just a little bit so we can see their faces a little bit more.
Mariel, nose toward me. A bit there, and then turn your nose toward me just a little bit, Brandon. And I want you to whisper what your favorite like drum pattern is.
And now that I have the pose really dialed in, this is where I inject a little bit of spontaneity to get natural motions back into this kind of really posed shot. And this gets them to interact a little bit naturally. And while they're kind of joking around and flirting a little bit, I'm moving, stepping in and out again, side to side, and just varying my angles to make sure I can get different types of shots as they're kind of going through this sequence of emotions. For this pose, I'm going to have him behind her and hugging and kind of cuddling around her.
Cuddle up right there, and then you're just kind of like flirty, just kind of looking this way. There you go. And then you're going to nuzzle in a little bit more, Brandon. There you go.
Oh, so close.
There you go. Yeah, your shoulders up a little bit. Can I just have you just loosen down? There you go.
But the key point here is to make sure that his arms are holding above her arms on the top. That way you can avoid that kind of maternity photo look of his hands around her belly. And here I'm getting a higher perspective, tilting the camera down a little bit and using the X-T3's tilting screen to make sure I can get my composition dialed in. And since this couple is really good at kind of being serious and having that kind of like peaceful look, I remind them that they can talk to each other. And
you guys can talk to each other a little bit.
and this gets them to smile a little bit naturally and have a little conversation going. And as we're in this environment, I do kind of notice this idea for a really cool scenic silhouette shot. And I bring the couple all the way to the spot that I need them to be. But I work with the couple first to get their pose really dialed in. From there, I kind of walk out to where I want my desired framing to be, and it's pretty far out where I can't really direct them. First, I take the first shot with the 50mm 1.0, and it really looks pretty solid. It has a very flat kind of perspective, and the trees really kind of frame them really nicely. But I really want something a little bit wider, so I switched to the 23mm lens. And here I think we're getting closer, but I just really want something a little bit more wider. So I switched to the 16mm lens for one last attempt, and here I'm really satisfied with the shot. I love the context. It's really the perfect framing of the couple between the trees, horizon line, and I chose to convert this photo to black and white really just to hone in on the shapes and the silhouettes without any distraction of the other color or light in the photo. So for this next shot, I'm going to do kind of a holding hands pose, but a little bit more stylized with the couple looking away from each other instead of the traditional looking toward each other. I really like this one because there's kind of like that glowing light in the background behind her, and this tree in the middle is kind of making this faux divider of the frame, really kind of making it a little bit more symmetrical. From there, I'm going to put them in this kind of more edgy camera aware pose where they're looking straight at the camera. And I really like this one because it's incorporating the mask, and it's really documenting kind of this accurate time of when they were planning their wedding, especially as we get further down the road in their lives. They'll be able to kind of remember back during this pandemic and how interesting it was to be engaged. So now I'm going to go into some solo shots of each the bride to be and the groom to be. For headshots, it's really about finessing kind of like the overall look of the face, adjusting the chin level, having the person point their nose the correct way, and also adjusting for that head tilt because you don't want them to kind of tilt sideways if they have a natural tendency to tilt their heads. And here I really like this one because it's super strong and confident, and I'm going to have him do a more natural one where he's just smiling. And now we're moving on to the bride, and I have her face with her body perpendicular to the camera, but have her look over her shoulder toward me. And then of course we have to do a smiling variation, a little bit more casual. Now as we're moving closer toward the coast, I do set up this shot to kind of frame them juxtaposed with these rocks in the background.
And have you rotate this way just a little bit, like you're together. There you go. And then Brandon, you're going to be looking into her this way.
At this point, they're pretty familiar with how I like them pose, and it's just me finessing their body language just a little bit. For this shot in particular, it's really a good example of my instruction flow. First, I'm going to tell them where to stand. Then I'm going to tell them where to face, which is facing each other.
And you're going to face just each other right here, toward each other.
I'm going to have them pull her in really close, and then have them lead their heads closer together.
And I'm going to have you guys get your heads in real close.
And then here I'm going to fine tune the angle of their faces by having them point their noses toward me just a little bit.
And have you turn your nose toward me just a little bit, Mario? A little bit more.
And by doing this like micro positioning of their face, this really dials in the light of the couple and the ratios of lighting in relation to each other. As I point her nose toward me just a little bit, this is going to give the bride a little bit brighter face and exposure than the guy who's in a little bit more shadow. And this is a very calculated thing that I'm doing, and it's something that's really subtle, but once you start getting the hang of it, it really does raise the kind of quality level of your photo that much more. And here I'm going to have them kind of like rotate towards me using a technique that my friend coined and calls the force touch, kind of like the Jedi in the Star Wars movies. So if you actually gesture with your hands and kind of like move the couple, like pretending to move the couple with the force, they're usually pretty good at following it. So try this trick on your own shoots and see if it works to help you kind of like direct the couple. And then the last step in my flow is really reminding the couple that they can talk just a little bit or give them some type of line to say. That would give some natural emotion to this photo, which is really the final layer of getting that perfectly posed shot and then injecting the perfect amount of emotion. So now that we're heading down towards the water, I stay positioned at the top of this little rock and instruct a couple to walk down with the guy leading her down just a couple steps apart. For this shot, I stop down just a little bit to ensure that I get them in focus as they're moving and walking.
And I have you just rotate your bodies toward each other. There you go. And then around her waist a little bit, pull her in right there. And then just cuddle in your head just a little bit. You're bringing your heads right there.
For this particular shot, I wanted to use the graffiti to kind of draw the eye into the center where the couple was going to be strategically posed. Again, this is a simple pose, and you can kind of notice that I'm using the same pose over and over and over, but having this type of other background and other setting and using the other visual interests is going to make these photos look different even though I'm using a very similar foundational pose.
I'm actually gonna have you guys scoot over this way and just lean on this wall a little bit. And I have you guys get your heads a little bit closer together. There.
And again, I'm always reminding the couple to get in a little bit closer. Yes, it's unnatural for them, but in photos, it looks way better than having small gaps of space, which kind of communicate this sense of like disconnectedness with the couple.
Cross like
Normal.
you'll be able to see me, yeah. So just
Okay.
back and forth.
So now I'm going to set them up to kind of walk down this kind of ledge, and I instruct them to walk hand in hand together and just go across.
Go ahead.
So for these particular shots, since the camera is perpendicular to the way that they're walking, I just use actually autofocus single, and I slightly stop down the lens and pre-focus on this ledge where they're walking, and it's actually doing a good job to make sure they're in focus. You don't have to vary too much and kind of risk the autofocus continuous aiming at the wrong thing. And basically what I'm trying to hone in for this shot was to play off the reflection with this really kind of like symmetrical faux mirrored composition. And after they reach the end of this walkway, I switch to a wide angle lens and have them come back the other way for a more epic type of shot. After that, I'm going to have them go to the very end of this kind of like dead end, and I'm using pretty much the same pose of them facing together, having their hips close and their arms around each other, their heads touching. Really hoping that this gives you guys confidence that you can use these simple poses and use them often and still get a little bit of variety just by changing the arm positions or changing the background or just rotating the couple just a little bit, just to make that small bit of difference, but still not having to reach for so many ideas of different poses that you have to use. And then before they walk back, I kind of run over to the middle part and I position myself again parallel to the path that they're going to walk, and have the camera pointed perpendicular in order to get this other type of mirrored shot. And before we head back to the beach, for this shot I wanted to do kind of like a sitting variation on this ledge. And with sitting, it's important again to still have them be very close. What I do is actually have the groom to be kind of sit straight up, and I have the bride come closer and lean into him. That way it's kind of a more natural kind of vibe. And then I have her pop out and they can kind of look at each other and talk to each other for more of like a candid conversation type of feel. And as they're still kind of talking, I switch over to a wider angle lens, and I use this kind of ledge on the left side to kind of anchor the shot with this curved leading line that kind of curves along toward the couple. And now that we're winding down to the end of the shoot, for this last backdrop, we head toward this kind of cave tunnel type thing. And before we enter, I use this dark wall of the tunnel as a dark backdrop to contrast with the directional light coming off to the left. And then I ask them to get close and almost kiss, but just not quite. And I have her put her hand on his cheek, and this kind of gets him to kind of laugh in reaction to it, and it was a really nice genuine moment to kind of get this silliness. And then I have them try to almost kiss one more time just to get that intimate moment. And from here, now we go into the tunnel to frame up what I call is a hero silhouette shot. And basically for me, a hero silhouette shot is a full body silhouette, and I use some type of surrounding framing elements. The key to this type of shot is to exaggerate the limbs and spread them further apart. So spread the feet a little bit more apart than usual and have your arms and elbows kind of popped out from the side of the body. That way you can create some shapes. And this gives the necessary gaps to kind of really define the shape of the body rather than having it be kind of standing straight up and blending into a blob or like a stick. And then for a close-up silhouette, I just really have them get their heads a little bit closer together, and again using the tunnel to kind of frame them naturally with this kind of arch. And then we finish up the shoot with one last camera aware shot, and that's pretty much a wrap for this behind the scenes shoot. I hope you learned a lot, and if you have any questions about the photos that I shown or the posing directions that I give, please leave a comment down below. All the photos in this video were edited with my RPB Lightroom presets, which you can purchase using the link down below.